First up on Amador this week is Let's Talk with your host, Larry Cenotto.
For joining us on Let's Talk, this week let's talk with Deane Swickard, the Area Manager for the Bureau of Land Management, a substantial landowner in this county. In fact, recently, I guess it was back in December that we noted in, I think, the newspaper that BLM was involved in some sort of land exchange or sale program, and that was the germ for this program. That's why we have Deane here. Thanks, Deane, very much.
Thank you.
BLM is sort of like, I call them the stealth agency or the quiet presence. I mean, we don't hear about BLM very much. I suppose you like that.
Well, I don't think it's accurate, actually.
Really?
In some places, BLM is probably one of the dominant land managing agencies. The BLM manages more land in the United States than any other agency. It's just, I think in Amador County, we don't have a lot of land, and so we're not as
there's no office here.
Yeah, we're not as obvious as maybe the Forest Service or some other agencies like that. Mm-hmm. But in some places, it's the dominant land managing agency, not so much around here.
Yeah. Area manager, what does that mean?
That basically means I'm the administrator of the local office, which is in Folsom. And we would administer the BLM lands from about Marysville to, say, Fresno, east of Interstate 5. Mm-hmm. It'd be about 250, 300,000 acres.
How many area offices does the state have?
I think we have about 15.
Boy, very interesting. How long have you been with BLM?
20 years.
That long. That long. We might as well get it right out. Before the program started here, they had a fantastic discussion about flying and the Vietnam War and all the rest of it. So flying's in your background.
Flying's in my background. I've been a ranger with the Park Service in Alaska. I was a pilot in the Marine Corps. I was a wildlife biologist. I've been a land use planner, and now I've been the area manager almost 20 years with BLM. Almost my entire career with BLM.
BLM in California or other
actually, I worked in Cedarville, which is in California, but most of the land we administered was in Nevada, and that was about 2 million acres. And then worked in our headquarters office in Sacramento, and then I've been in Folsom for about 15 years.
Mm-hmm. We are assuming, I'm sure there are people out there that really don't know what the BLM or Bureau of Land Management is. Tell us about it.
Well, the Bureau of Land Management is the agency that now manages what used to be called the public domain. And actually, it's two agencies that came together about 50 years ago. And those two agencies were the General Land Office and the Grazing Service, or what they used to call the Taylor Grazing Service at times. So you had these two offices come together to form the Bureau of Land Management. The Land Office, you heard the term doing a land office business?
Yes.
Well, that's where basically the role of that office was to distribute federal land out. And then on the other side, of course, the Taylor Grazing Act led to the Grazing Service. Those two came together, formed the Bureau of Land Management in 1947.
Oh, that recently.
Yeah, and so we only have about a 50-year history.
Basically, your mission is, how much property?
In California, the Bureau of Land Management manages about 17 million acres. I think throughout the United States it's around 278 million acres that the Bureau of Land Management manages. In addition, there's another maybe 100 million acres of subsurface land, mineral rights that the Bureau of Land Management also manages in some states. So it's a substantial responsibility, and basically what we do is multiple use management of public land. So we have all of the kinds of uses you might expect: mining, grazing, recreation, the full spectrum of multiple use.
Multiple use, is that still a viable concept?
Yes.
Seems like it's kind of controversial in some places, particularly in the Forest Service. That like some people want to shut the forest down and forget this whole multiple use. Do you feel those pressures at the
We feel
BLM?
the pressures. There's just a lot of competing interests in public lands. There's a lot of interest in natural resources. So you end up having a great deal of variation of opinion about how public resources should be managed. And we're right in the middle of that with the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and all those that deal with public resources.
How did one make the distinction at one time between what was forest land, what was BLM land?
If you go back historically, all of the lands that came into basically the public domain, or those lands owned by the United States, would be what the Bureau of Land Management manages today. However, out of that tremendous base, there's been the national forests have been established through the Forest Reserve Acts, mostly in about 1902, 1903, 1904, in that period of time. Teddy Roosevelt was president. So it carved out national forests, and they're described entities. They were taken out of the public domain. Wildlife refuges, lands for the railroads, and then, of course, mining claim patents. And the most famous, of course, would be the land grants. So all of those lands came out of what was once the public domain. What remains of that public domain is managed by the Bureau of Land Management.
What percentage of California is still in public domain?
Managed by BLM, roughly about 16 or 17%. If you figure California's 100 million acres, you've got about 17 million acres administered by BLM and about 17 or 18 million administered by the Forest Service. And then you've got another a few million acres by military bases and that kind of thing.
So when California was a state in 1850, it was basically all public domain. Started out that way. Huh?
Most of it is public domain, of course, is coming from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, as we mentioned earlier. There were some Spanish land grants, and those land grants were recognized by the United States government. So those were not lost.
They had to go through a process in order to do that, as I
don't remember the process. I know that if you take a look at some of the master title plats, even to this day, you can see the remnants of old land grants. So those are recognized. The means, I'm not sure.
We have a major one in Amador County, as a matter of fact, or half of it. Rancho Arroyo Seco is a land grant, and so half of it's in Amador and half of it's in Sacramento. Yeah, they did go through a process, and we'll be talking about a process coming up here later on in the program. Let's talk about BLM in Amador County. Just how big a presence do you have here? How many acres? I wish I knew how many acres. I know there's about 600 square miles in Amador, but I never did get the figure for the number of acres to see how much BLM owns or Forest Service owns. Right.
In Amador County, BLM has a fairly minor presence. There's less than 10,000 acres administered by BLM. Actually, it's something like 9,300 and something. So it's a relatively small amount of acreage. Some of the lands along the McCollum River and other land is just scattered throughout the county. Many of those parcels of public land have mining claims on them. Some, of course, have things like grazing leases, and many are used for recreation, especially along the rivers, and some are used for hunting. Some have access for the public, some don't.
Are they basically upcountry, or I mean, are they all throughout the county? Elevation, you know?
They're scattered throughout the county from basically Ione up to say the 4,000, 4,500 foot level.
So we do have some down in the lower elevations.
Right.
And basically, we could say that in probably most cases, if it's owned by BLM, it is public domain land that was never owned by private parties at all?
Pretty much. There's some exceptions, but generally that's true.
Can you characterize the BLM holdings in this county? I know they're in various parts, but generally speaking, is it timber?
Generally speaking, it's those parcels that weren't useful for other purposes and didn't go out of federal ownership historically. So you've got some remnant pieces in around Ione that have very, we shouldn't call them poor soils, but generally unproductive soils, in some cases very rare soils. And then as you get up, of course, closer to Pine Grove in this area, you get into the pine belt. So you get a mix of conifers, brush, and scattered parcels of various sizes with a nice blocking up along the McCollum River from Highway 49 east of the Forest Service boundary.
You talked about a while ago about mining permits, mining claims, and we'll get into that a little bit more in the other part. Are there any active mines or mining claims on BLM land?
We administer 10,000 mining claims out of our office. A portion of that is in Amador County. I think it's something like 800 or 900 mining claims. There's very few that are active. Most of the mining claims have been held for a long time by people. They don't have any active large mining. Some you still see a little bit of prospecting, but not a great deal. There are a couple of people who actively do hard rock mining, but much of what we see now is dredging. People like to go down a river, throw a dredge in, and vacuum the bottom of it. And we've had an experimental program to allow that on the McCullough River for the last year, actually.
Do these mining claims lapse?
They can lapse if they don't do their paperwork right and pay their fees. They lapse and they're lost, and then so they can either refile the claims, or someone else could conceivably file on those same properties.
What constitutes a mining claim? How do you get a mining claim?
Theoretically, a person would go out and be prospecting and find a valuable discovery. In other words, they're going to find this country gold. Then they would stake their claim, which is physically put markers up around their claim, and then go file it with the county and with the Bureau of Land Management.
This has to be on federal?
It has to be on federal
public,
land,
yeah.
open to what we call mineral entry. In other words, open to mining claiming.
Is most of the land, BLM, open?
Generally speaking, most of it is. There's some that's withdrawn. Actually, what happens today, though, is people file claims on the land per se without ever having made a valuable discovery. In other words, they file the claim first, then go look. It used to be, of course, you'd go look, find the gold, then file the claim. And that's why I think there's a lot of controversy surrounding the mining law. Many people feel it just isn't being used for the purposes that it was originally established for.
Okay, when you go up and you establish a mining claim, I mean, you know, gold mining claims are 300 feet wide by whatever, at least along the gold belt. I don't, how is it there? What rights does it give you to any piece of property is what I'm getting at.
What you have, a mining claimant would have the exclusive right to explore for and develop the minerals on that claim. That's what it gives them.
How big would a claim
Most of the
be?
claims are 20 acres that we deal with. The placer claims are 20 acres.
So in effect, by filing a mining claim and doing a few minimal things, I mean, people can really have use for 20 acres of property someplace. Is that what it comes down to?
They have the exclusive right to explore for and develop the minerals. They don't have the exclusive right to the surface of that property. So if others want to hike on it, picnic, fish, cross it, or whatever, that's permissible. Those are all called casual uses, and a mining claimant can't interfere with those. On the other hand, the public can't come in and interfere with the mining claimant who might be operating machinery. I mean, there has to be obviously some reasonable judgment here, but a mining claimant doesn't stop all other uses of the public land.
When you have a mining claim, what else can you put in the property? Can you put a residence?
No.
Or a cabin? Or
all uses of the mining claim have to be reasonably incident to mining. So if an individual wants to live in a mining claim, they come to us, we take a look at their mining plan, and then determine whether or not it's appropriate for them to reside on the claim. And basically the test is, if they need to live there to mine, we'll allow it. Many times people just want to live there.
Right.
That's not going to be allowed. Now those who do mine and do reside on a claim, they have to put up a bond. In other words, a performance bond, so if they either damage the land or don't do the things they're supposed to do, there's a bond that protects the public interest.
Most of the BLM land accessible by road?
It's a mix. Some is, some isn't. Much of some of the reasons we're doing land exchanges is to increase the availability of public land. There may be public land in an individual county like Amador, but much of it is inaccessible because there's no legal access. There's no legal way to get to it. It may be physical access. It may actually be a road, but that road may be privately owned across private property, and the public doesn't have a right to use private property to get to public land without the private landowner's approval.
Repeat again, how many mining claims in Amador County?
Well, I don't know the exact number. As I said, there's 10,000 in our resource area. I think there's something like 800 or 900 here in Amador County.
And how many of those you really think that are people up there really looking for gold, really mining, really have an opening, a shaft?
Half a dozen.
Half a dozen?
Yes.
And yet the remaining ones are still active and still...
They keep their paperwork up.
Which means that they have to do some improvement every year, or...
That's what they used to have to do assessment work.
Yeah.
Now they can file waivers on that, and also they pay a $100 fee to keep their claim. Most people keep the claims, I think it's sort of a historic situation, a recreational situation, but very little of it is mining. related. I mean, that's my experience.
Yeah. We want to talk about this dredging program that you have a little bit more. Let's pause right now. We'll continue our conversation with Deane Swickard in just a moment.
Shop Total Value, the store everyone is talking about for everyday low prices. The Fresh Produce Department offers a year-round indoor farmers market style shopping experience where great selection, quality, and value are second to none. Save on the outstanding selection of mushrooms and beautiful artichokes. Portobello mushrooms only $1.99. 8-ounce mushrooms, sliced or large, only 89 cents. And artichokes only 59 cents. Total Value, the no-frills, clear-cut savings store with an unconditional 100% money-back guarantee. Open daily till 7, closed Sunday. Food stamps and cash only. No checks accepted. Total Value for total savings on Sutter Hill.
I own an auto repair center, and when it comes to helping people make good decisions about their cars, I recommend All Pro Auto Parts. Look, cars don't break down on schedule. When I need quality parts to get a car back on the road, All Pro Auto Parts comes through with expert service, a great selection, competitive prices, and convenient hours. I depend on All Pro because my customers depend on me. So when you need an auto parts specialist, whether it's in my garage or yours, shop where I shop, All Pro Auto Parts.
Your All Pro dealer is ATI Parts Stores with 2 convenient locations, Sutter Hill and Pine Grove.
It's these people at Campbell Chevron that make sure you get great service. It's that simple. We've been in business 27 years under the same ownership. We're experienced, we work hard, and we keep up with technology. Save yourself some bucks, get it done right the first time and with a smile. Campbell's has 24-hour damage-free towing, and now we are known as the Brake Stop, offering a lifetime warranty on brake pads and shoes. Campbell Chevron, the Brake Stop.
Celebrating 50 years of local service, Manacero Insurance Agency has been operating with one goal in mind: service. Give the customer what they need. Helped by my team of insurance professionals, we are still serving local residents and businesses with customized personal service and insurance. Today, Manacero Insurance is preparing for the future by insuring yours. Experience and service you can count on. Manacero Insurance, Main Street, Sutter Creek, and Clinton Road in Jackson.
The Bank of Amador is your local bank. They specialize in construction and local business loans with 3 convenient locations, Jackson, Buckhorn, and Ione. Financially strong with local convenience. The Bank of Amador, member FDIC, an equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Amador, local people helping local people. You're watching Amador County's.
Let's continue our conversation with Deane Swickard, the area manager of Bureau of Land Management, engaged in a land sale or exchange program among other things. You mentioned dredging, and of course we have weekend dredgers and full-time dredgers, and particularly after a big storm, I guess there's all kinds of people that go out and dredge. Tell us about that program.
First, it's a growing recreational activity, suction dredging. And people have various sized dredges. They'd go out, drop them in a river, and suction the bottom and come up with some gold. It's a program that some people really like and others don't, because those who fish or those who swim don't like the noise of the dredges and some of the siltation and so on. What we try to do is get back to this multiple use concept and not exclude people from doing activities, but hopefully place them in areas where it's compatible. So on the McCollum River last year, we had an experimental program with PG&E, East Bay Municipal Utility District, the county, and BLM, and the Foothill Conservancy was actually working with us. And what we did is we allowed about a half a dozen, actually 3 different areas for dredging. We set up 3 different areas, had a dredge go in there every 2 weeks, people would get a permit, and then we took a look at how that met up with other kinds of activities.
What part of the McCollum was this?
It was between Highway 49 and the electric powerhouse.
Oh, okay.
And each of these permittees, you want to call them that, got a chunk of river they could use exclusively, and it worked out very nicely. And not only got rich, but they had a lot of fun, and they had the exclusive use of an area, which minimizes competition between others, because in dredging, if someone dredges above you, or in other words upstream, and you hit a pocket of silt, it blows you out. In other words, it means that you can't see to operate. So we set the dredgers out in a certain area. We tried to keep them away from the swimmers and the boaters and the fishermen, and I think it worked fairly decently last year.
So they had an exclusive as far as other dredgers, but that didn't mean that all other uses were, well, you have to stay away this week because we're dredging.
That's right.
Everything was going on at the same time still?
That's right.
Why is BLM involved in that?
Personally, I believe it is really where gold mining is going in the mother lode. You either have major industrial operations for gold mining or you have recreational activity. And I think dredging is one of the recreational activities that people really enjoy, and we need to provide a place for them to do it, and hopefully that place won't impact other activities or resources.
So what I'm getting at, you own the land, is that why you can regulate it and issue permits? You own the land on both sides of the river?
We own the land, but in addition, we have other responsibilities because what we do could impact other users, especially like East Bay Mud, which is downstream of us, who would receive any silt or any other kinds of problems that developed. I mean, they're all headed downstream. So that's why we all got together, and I think we had a good program last year, and it was successful.
I'm still not clear. Because you own land on both sides, that makes you the permitting agency?
Right. We could actually own land on one side and still be permitting.
You could?
Sure. Sure.
They could they go on the other side of the creek, the other half?
You're going to keep splitting hairs here with me?
Is it just the McCollum? Do you have anything like that on the Cosumnes? Or how about any of the creeks? I mean, do you own land on Sutter Creek or?
We do. We have land, obviously, the public land on a lot of creeks and rivers. We have a recreational program for dredging on the South Yuba River out of Nevada City. As I said, we had one here on the McCully last year, which is experimental. We have one on the Merced River in Mariposa County. The idea being we've got it spread out, I think, at a reasonable distance where if people want to go and dredge, we've provided a place for them within a reasonable commute. Most of these people are on vacation.
Yeah.
And they want to come out and take their 2-week vacation and dredge.
Have you evaluated the program yet?
We're evaluating it now, actually.
Yeah. Do you have hearings or Foothill Conservancy or any of the people, feeding in comments and criticisms and what have you?
Well, what we did is we brought in the groups I mentioned, the Foothill Conservancy, PG&E, East Bay Municipal Utility District, BLM, and originally Tom Baymert from the county supervisors. We all sat down, kind of worked out what we thought would be a workable program, and then implemented it last year.
Where did this take place?
We met here in Jackson, I think, actually, and once we met at Lake Pardee, I think.
Was this a public meeting or most?
It was just actually those of us that had a vested interest sitting down, and the last meeting we also had someone from, I think the Mother Lode Research, something. Mother Lode Research, we'll leave it at that, council or something, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the point being is to let everyone that has an interest comment and condition what we're doing so that it doesn't impact their interests.
Yeah. Most meetings, even committee meetings these days, have to be noticed and agendized and all this, and that's why I'm wondering whether this meeting, which brought all these people together to talk about an important thing, was public noticed and the public had a right to come to it.
Well, the public has a right. We didn't notice it. I mean, every time we meet with another agency, we can hardly notice it. There are certain things we have to notice, as we'll talk about in land exchanges, which we did. Some of these are what I call working meetings, where we're just working out ideas, and so the public's not excluded, but we don't have a notice for it either.
One other thing I want to touch upon, then we'll get to this land exchange program. Are there, of all this property that you have in the county, any of it have significant cultural, historical, archaeological, resources that we need to know about or should know about?
Most of what we find in the county is historical, gold mining related. Ditches, cabins, or at least foundations of old cabins. Some Indian related cultural resources. But we generally don't tell the public where those are because there's a tendency to raid them. So we protect them, and we don't trade lands that have those resources. In other words, they would not be lands part of the land exchange.
Is there a list somewhere of these resources, or you don't want to have a list?
We keep a map of the location of them, and also all the sites are noted, and we ship certain paperwork to the State Historic Preservation Officer, who also keeps the records of all of these kinds of sites. So there's an official repository for that information, and then we keep its location on maps in our own office so that we have that information when we're doing a timber sale or activities that could disturb the surface of the land.
All right, let's turn to the the land exchange. What do you call it? Is it land exchange or sale?
Land exchange?
No sale, buy, sell involved in the thing?
Not by the BLM. Obviously, when we trade it to people, as I'll explain, they will frequently sell it. We do have authority for land sales, and we use those occasionally. We use land sales where someone may have built a home partially on BLM by accident.
Oh,
and
that happens?
They don't, it's not an exchange. You simply have to make them whole, so we chip off a little piece of the public land and sell it to them, essentially. So we have authority to do that kind of thing. Normally, we're trading land, and that's the major program.
I think you mentioned earlier, in Amador County, BLM has 9,300, something like that, acres. I think I read somewhere that 4,300 is up for exchange, some figure like that. Tell us why are you having this program? How to get started? Why?
Well, if you go back to what we talked about and how the public domain ended up as it is, there was no order to it. It was what remained from all of these other programs that disposed of land.
Right. That's why you have some here in Ione and some way up there.
And our program is to try and block that land up better so that the public has better access to it and it's more manageable. And to do that, we trade land. We will acquire land from a willing seller, essentially, someone who wants to give up their land, and we trade out federal lands. And so you've got, in this case, there's about 4,300 acres we've identified originally in Amador County that we might put up for exchange. We've removed from that list probably 2,000 acres that once we looked at it more closely, it either had resources we wanted to maintain and didn't want to trade out of. And so we're down to a smaller fraction of that. And then we find of the lands that we're willing to exchange, maybe 10 or 20% actually go out of federal ownership. Because we may be willing to trade it, but in many cases no one wants it. So there's no one that steps forward to acquire the property. So it's not a very direct sort of relationship of these numbers. Once you start looking at lands, those lands frequently have cultural resources, rare plants, rare animals, and those cannot go out of federal ownership. Neither can properties with mining claims. So if a mining claim is on the property, it isn't traded out of federal ownership.
Mining claim, regardless of its circumstances, whether it's being actively pursued or passively pursued.
Right.
Yeah. I think I read where some group called the Mining Council or something like that, at least at one time, was sort of really concerned about this, that it was going to affect these mining claims. Has that proved true?
No. As I said, if there's a mining claim on the property, it can't be, we don't dispose of it. So we don't trade it out of federal ownership. And they were under the impression that we could and would, but we don't. Now, in some cases, a mining claimant may be interested in acquiring the federal land, and they will relinquish their mining claim to clear the path for the land being traded. So sometimes that does occur. But there's no forcible acquisition of trading out of the federal lands by taking someone's mining claim. And I think that message finally came across, but it took a little discussion.
Well, what is the status of all this? Sounds like we started out with a big number, and time you did all these various things, we really came down to a pretty small number. Has there been any actual exchanges taking place in this?
Now, well, there has been. I need to say that this isn't a new program. We happened to publish a notice in the newspaper that had a lot of property on it at once, and that's what created interest. But we've had land exchange authority for 20 years, and we've done little land exchanges here and there. So this isn't something that's absolutely new. What we do find, though, is, as I said, we'll maybe look at 3,000 or 4,000 acres. Maybe 10 or 20% of that will go out of federal ownership, and generally it goes to the adjacent landowners. People in the county, the neighbors, generally are the ones that are interested in acquiring the property. And so it ties in very nicely with the existing land uses in an area. There isn't, as some people worry about, like if there's 4,000 acres in Amador County, that's going to go to some huge developer who's going to change the character of the area. That isn't the way it goes. Also, I think that this ties in nicely with the home rule issues that the county supervisors...
Yeah, we want to talk about that.
Right. And one of the things I'm interested in is seeing some of the land privatized, and that does this. Some increased access, and that land exchange program does that. And beyond that, I think we met with the Board of Supervisors. At their request, we sent out a letter to every adjacent landowner to BLM in the county, where we may be considering trading land. So
that's not your normal policy?
No, it's not. We normally notice it. We normally put a newspaper notice 4 times in the local newspaper. And then we have 2 45-day waiting periods for comment. We did that in this case, but in addition, working with the county, we notified every adjacent landowner. The county gave us the mailing labels and put together a little map and letter, and we sent it out to every single individual that adjoined public land, at least that their record showed. And so, and that's part, I think, what the county's asking for in home rule is to be heard.
Right.
And to work together. And this is a small example, but I think it's significant of the kinds of things that they're looking for. And I say they're, meaning in this case the Amador board, but many other boards of supervisors.
What was the result of all this? Is that land exchange over now, or is it still in process? Or
it's still in process, and what's going to happen is that individuals show interest in property, and then we'll work through the process on each parcel, which means all the environmental clearances, appraisals, and that kind of thing before the properties are actually transferred out of federal ownership.
Let's get it straight. Is each one an exchange?
That's a good question. Let me explain to you how we do our land exchanges now. Historically, we would do a land exchange with Rancher Smith. His 40 acres for the BLM 40 acres. Each one was worth $100. I mean, that used to be the way it was in Nevada, very commonly. It isn't that way in California, and certainly it's not that way in the mother lode where land values are very high. What happens is we use an intermediary and what we call a land exchange facilitator. And we use the Trust for Public Lands or the Nature Conservancy, the American River Conservancy, and in this case we're using what they call Cal BLM-X, Cal BLM land exchanges. And Cal BLM-X, for example, will go acquire a piece of land that the Bureau of Land Management wants to acquire, and let's say that's worth $1 million. So they will go and take their cash and buy it for the federal government. And then we trade land to Cal BLM-X, which then sells that land. And that's how they recoup the $1 million that they use to buy the land for the public. And most of the lands that we're acquiring are either wetlands or riverfront property for the most part. And so we're blocking up land, and of course that's what we're interested in doing on the McCullamy. So it gives a larger block of public land that the people can get access to, recreate on, fish hunt or whatever it is, and then dispose of some of these isolated parcels that do not have those same attributes. And then we put some money on the tax rolls, and I think can just improve the whole land management scheme in the county.
Is this the process you followed here?
That's what we're doing here. Like I say, we're just getting into the aspect of actually trading property out of federal ownership now.
And basically, you just sort of hinted here, is what you're really trying to do is to consolidate your ownership along the McCullamy River? Is that what you're trying to do?
Along lots of rivers. The North Fork of the American River.
I'm just talking about Amador County.
Oh, yeah, it would be largely along the McCullamy. Right.
That is really your purpose. How is it working?
Well, I think it's going to work. We have to have willing buyers. One of the things that are, I should say willing sellers, not just people who want to dispose of their property.
Along the river.
Right. And so you've got to be a little careful because you don't want to look predatory. In other words, we don't want to force people into selling their property to the federal government. So if they're ready and willing, then we have the intermediary who works with them to acquire the property. So a lot of it is timing. And what happens is we have a pool. As we put land in and out of federal ownership, there's a pool of money that develops, and that's what's, again, used to acquire property. You understand that? Did that pooling agreement make sense there? I don't know that I explained it that well.
Try it again.
Okay. If an intermediary acquires land for us, and I'll say it's worth $1 million,
you tell them
go buy that piece down the McCullamy River that we want because Mr. and Mrs. Smith is ready to sell. They'll go acquire it for us. And if it's worth $1 million, then we trade them $1 million worth of property. So now we're even.
Who appraises?
We have a BLM appraiser that appraises, and we can't take less than fair market value, which is appraised value. Well, what happens, though, we're always in land exchanges, if not in Amador County, Calaveras, Mariposa, Tuolumne, Nevada, Yuba, El Dorado, Placer. And actually money goes in and out, and so we have a pool. And sometimes the federal government has a positive balance, and sometimes there's a positive balance toward the facilitator. At the end of the year, we have to be within 25% of equal value by law. And so this process isn't one single point in time, but it's always going on back and forth as we acquire and dispose of land. And our hope is that in Amador County, Calaveras County, and all the other counties I mentioned, that we'll eventually develop this better land ownership pattern that serves the public interest better, and I think creates a better tax situation. In some cases, land we've traded out of federal ownership, for example, has been used for a gas station, a boat rental area, a market. So I mean, those lands then create jobs, a greater tax, better return to the county, where they sat basically idle under federal ownership.
Thought just came to me that Sierra Pacific Industries, the new major landowner in Amador County now, by buying out Georgia Pacific, they also have, well, they're the largest independent owner of timberlands, I guess, in the state. They are involved in the, up there, the Pacific, the Redwood situation up there, and have you had some dealings with that group? Because they've got property that they could sell for exchange elsewhere, perhaps timberlands or something.
We deal with SPI. We haven't done any land exchanges directly with them, although we've had involvement in our forestry programs with them.
Mm-hmm. We'll continue our conversation and conclude it in this next segment, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Whether it's your first time panning for gold or you're an experienced prospector, 49er metal detectors can meet all your mining needs. Our highly qualified and experienced staff will show you a full line of dredging equipment, including the unique and hard to find. And for that beginning enthusiast, we have dredging and metal detector seminars. When you need the best in metal detectors, mining supplies, books, and mining equipment, come to 49er Metal Detectors in Pine Grove, California, just 10 minutes from Jackson off Highway 88. See you soon.
We know what you want in a used vehicle. Safety, dependability, cleanliness, and at the right price. Hi, this is Frank Halverson for Prospect Motors and Amador Toyota, inviting you to come down and check out our huge selection of pre-owned cars and trucks. All vehicles come with a free 30-day warranty. High quality at low prices. So why buy anywhere else? That's Prospect Motors and Amador Toyota, your Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Cadillac, Buick, and Toyota dealer, the family dealership that treats you like family.
The Rainbow Water Store in Mother Lode Plaza, Highway 49, Jackson, has refillable containers conveniently sized to meet your family's individual needs. They have home delivery service and a water dispensing station outside their store. Rainbow Water, where dreams of an inexpensive, great-tasting beverage really do come true.
Safeguard Pest Control, we're the experienced professionals of the Mother Lode.
Prior to spraying any pesticides, the Safeguard technicians will take the time to get rid of unsightly spider webs. We get to the source of ant problems if it means climbing up to the attic or crawling under your house. Safeguard Pest Control is locally owned and run by professionals who take the time to do the job right. Call today.
Mother Lode.
When you want the freshest flowers, call Gordon Hill Flower Shop. Whatever the occasion, wherever the destination, you can count on our staff to deliver arrangements that exceed your expectations for quality. We guarantee it. Call Gordon Hill Flower Shop at 223-0123 or visit us at 515 Broadway in Jackson. We'll help you speak the language of the heart beautifully.
The new Simplicity lawn tractor has an accelerator like your car. You may even say it drives like a car. When you turn on a dime, when you encounter a rough road, when you power uphill or down, and when you find the handy extras. So when you see this, you'll know what to do. The lawn tractor that drives like a car. From Simplicity. It's that simple.
Available at Guy's, more than just a saw center, it's your outdoor power equipment headquarters. You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN, and now back to Let's Talk with your host, Larry Cenotto.
Our concluding segment of our conversation with Deane Swickard, the area manager of the Bureau of Land Management, office in Folsom, and he'll probably give you the phone number and address and everything else here at the conclusion of the program. Did we cover everything pertinent about this land exchange and sale? I mean, I still haven't found out who's bought any property or who's got any property from this whole program. Is that, can you tell us that?
Well,
you probably don't have the names on the top of your head.
The names of individuals, but I can tell you that it's generally adjacent landowners that acquire the land. So it's not going to be people from outside the area. It's almost always people who live in the area and are already part of the community that acquire the property. That's been our experience. It's very unusual that anything other than that happens.
It's certainly public information. I mean, if anyone really wants to know, I guess they can go to the assessor's office or they can go to your office. I mean, it's not private or secret.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Anything of that nature.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Like I say, we put it in the newspaper at least 4 times, in addition to
But I mean, the people who actually acquired.
Oh, certainly. Once they take title, it's definitely part of the county records, of course.
Probably, you know, a lot. You guys, I was on the web before this program, as I told you, kind of going around trying to see what I could learn, you know, quickly about Bureau of Land Management. One of the things I think you guys pretty well are self-supporting. Did I read this right? I mean, your income from grazing fees and various other things, I mean, is that the aim to try to match?
Actually, I mean, if you want to call it a profit, BLM takes in more money than it spends. So other than the IRS and a couple other agencies, I think Customs, BLM brings in more money than any other agency in the federal government. And a lot of it comes off of mineral royalties, oil and gas, coal and that sort of thing. So yeah, we do, and I think it surprises a lot of people.
We're talking about land exchange and all that because it's in your interest. You know, we want to solidify, consolidate our here, so therefore we've got to give up somewhere else. Is there a policy saying we should divest ourselves of property as a general principle and return it to the tax rolls?
Actually, the law is contrary to that. Basically, the Federal Land Management and Policy Act of 1976 says the federal government will hold on to land and manage it for multiple use and sustain yield. So we have a policy of retaining federal land. Now, we also have a land use planning process which lays out how those lands are going to be managed, and part of that is what we call land tenure adjustment. In other words, trading land back and forth to come up with a better pattern of federal land ownership.
So you're really not in the business to get rid of property, even though a lot of people out there these days are saying, you know, get out of the business or what have you. You know, we've got too much, you know, federal ownership of the state and everything. I mean,
yeah, I hear that. I think our answer to that is let's come up with the best pattern of ownership that serves the local communities well and provides opportunities that public lands are supposed to provide and protects resources that are commonly owned by everyone. So I think this land exchange process meets a lot of those goals, so I think it makes some good sense.
We talk about multi-use many times, multiple purpose, what have you. Forest Service having a lot of problem with that concept. Obviously, Sierra Club never said, saying shut it all down, don't cut timber anymore, this type of thing. Are you guys running into that?
We run into a lot of controversy. There's so many views on how public land should be managed that you get controversy if you do or you get controversy if you don't. As I said, I think multiple use makes some sense. I think we have to come up with a strategy that allows us to use public lands in a way that doesn't limit the option of future generations or destroys the productivity of our land. If we do those things, I think we're in pretty good shape.
What are the hot spots, hot issues in your general area?
Well, it would be timber, the mining law.
You have timberland, BLM has much timberland?
We have about 50,000 acres of what we consider commercially productive timberlands. And so we would cut about, on average, 3 or 4 million board feet a year, which is really not a large amount. And for the last few years, we've really been mostly dealing with salvage sales, either bugs, beetles in the trees that have killed them, or fire.
You have land at Tahoe?
No.
You don't have any there?
It's Forest Service.
Where's your bugs problem?
Scattered out from Mariposa to Yuba County, little pockets of public land.
Your land is lower elevation, you don't run into the spotted owl or anything like that, or pressures to say don't cut anything?
Well, we have all those issues, of course, spotted owl. We have limestone salamander, rare plants, all the things that occur on land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we deal with all those.
Yeah. I didn't ask before, how much land do you own along the McCullum River, or is it BLM own?
Well, of course, it's in 2 counties along the river, but I would say about half of what we own in Amador counties along the river. So we've probably got 3,000 or 4,000 acres total along the river.
How much frontage? I mean, from Highway 49 up, do you own a lot of
it? There's gaps. There's several substantial gaps above Electric Powerhouse, and then there's another gap of a mile or 2 before you get to the Forest Service boundary. But from about a mile above Highway 49, then on up to the Forest Service boundary, probably 70% of it is BLM administered lands.
Mm-hmm. We talked about home rule before too, and you cited the case in this land exchange where, because of home rule, the idea to let the locals know, you sent out notices to all these people. Can you cite any other examples of things you've done because of this idea to let the locals know more what's going on?
Well, there's a whole program we have that we're experimenting with that has little to do with land exchanges, in fact, nothing to do with it, which we call community-based planning. And what we do is we work with local communities to see how the public lands in their community ought to be managed. In other words, have the citizens work with us in developing the land use plans. And we have two plans that we're working on in Nevada County and one in Placer County like that. And it's where the citizens of the local area actually sit down with us and work on the planning together. And it's gotten a lot of attention. As a matter of fact, I was talking about it at the law school at Berkeley a couple of weeks ago, because a lot of the law school students are interested in these kinds of initiatives. And I think they're responsive to the home rule issue, which is how can the citizens have a hand in the management of their public lands? I think that's really the issue behind home rule is being heard. Mm-hmm. And some people want to go beyond just having their supervisors represent them. They want to represent themselves.
They want to get the federal government out of their lives.
Or they want to see the federal government operate in a way that's consistent with their views.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. That's something we're trying to, it's inconsistent with our normal processes, but I think it's an experiment worth pursuing, and that's what we're doing. So I think I've spent a lot of time with this home rule issue. We even had Dick Carver from Knight County, Nevada.
We had him on this program.
Well, he was at our office as a guest speaker. And met with him actually over at my neighbor's home as well. And so I've tried to get at the essence of what bothered him and what is the heart of that movement. And I think some of the things we're doing are responsive to that.
Mm-hmm. Home rule also affects law enforcement. How do you interface with law enforcement, particularly in this county, and your property?
We have 2 rangers, one that's stationed in Sonora and one that's stationed in Folsom, who comes out and patrols the BLM lands, and we have certain law enforcement authorities, and then we'll coordinate with the local sheriff's office, depends upon the kind of problem. If it's just resource-based, BLM handles it ourselves. If it's narcotics or something like that, then we deal with the local authorities as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of law enforcement, I understand you're in the throes, BLM's in the throes of a major to-do about law enforcement. You just scrapped all your plans and Babbitt says start back in square one. What's that all about?
That's what I've been told. The Secretary said we're back to square one. So apparently the regulations that we were trying to promulgate or pass have been withdrawn, and that's at the Secretary's level, so I guess we're going to take another look at them.
But I guess, for the last quarter century, the Forest Service people and BLM have been sort of dragged. I know they didn't want to. They didn't want to be law enforcement, but they were almost forced to get involved in law enforcement. How far, like at Folsom, for example, how far are you into law enforcement?
Well, we have both rangers who do patrol work and agents who do investigations. And you don't like to be drawn in any further than you have to, but the simple fact is there's crimes on public lands and we have to deal with them. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you need law enforcement personnel.
What is the issue in this case? Well, I mean, why is it being withdrawn, or did it go too far, not far enough? Or?
Actually, I think it was largely bringing a lot of existing authorities together in one place, and I think it struck people as new and more powerful authorities, and it created a firestorm, mainly, I guess, in Idaho, but in other places as well. In our office, I've gotten very little comment, with the exception of some individuals believing that all public lands were now closed to shooting because of those new law enforcement rules, which isn't true. Mm-hmm. But that's the one thing that we've heard in our office. The rest of the issues and the controversy over law enforcement just never materialized in our area.
I don't think we've touched upon hunting, and there are certainly a lot of hunters out there, hunting in BLM land. How do they, any problem there?
No problem. Public lands are open to hunting. I'm a hunter. I know a lot of my friends are hunters, and it's open hunting. It's one of the uses that's permissible. Normal restrictions, of course, if you want to shoot in your homes and things like that. But it's open to hunting, and you get deer hunters, turkey hunters, quail hunters, pig hunters. There's all kinds of hunters, and they use the public lands a great deal, and it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about these land use relationships with local government. Do we have enough land in this county that you could set up something like that here in Amador?
It's conceivable. It's largely dependent upon the community itself. Do they have an interest? Mm-hmm. And some do, some don't. The other thing is it's partially dependent on our ability to do a number of these plans at once. We have 3 going at the moment. But they're powerful. It's a powerful thing to see the citizens work together with various points of view to resolve differences, as opposed to trying to deal with a federal agency. I think it's a great form of democracy. Mm-hmm. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. What haven't we covered that's pertinent to BLM land in Amador County?
Well, it's the public's land. I think that's a major point to remember, that the people own it. We manage it for them. We like to know how they feel about it, what kinds of management they'd like to see, and we need a close working relationship with the public, and we like to have that. So I think that's one thing one thing we didn't dwell on was that the ultimate owner are all the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we didn't mention was, well, we've got some baseball diamonds up country around Buckhorn, Pioneer up there that BLM had something to do with.
We have a program which we call the Recreation and Public Purposes Act, an act that allows BLM to provide land to counties or nonprofit organizations for recreational or public purposes, and that Pioneer Park was one of those. We really like those. It provides land for cemeteries, parks, ball fields, all kinds of things. So it's a good program, and we've done some of that in almost every county in the Mother Lode.
Mm-hmm. If the folks in this county have any problems with BLM, questions, the buck stops with you, I suppose, or at least starts with you. How do they get in touch?
Well, I doubt very much they have problems with BLM, but if you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm Deane Swickard, the area manager with the Bureau of Land Management. You can reach me at 985-4474 in area code 916. And I'll be happy to talk to you or discuss any of your issues or help you out in any way I can.
Can we reach you on the internet?
You can reach me on the internet, but I don't know what my address is. But we do have one.
Deane, thank you very much for being with us on the program. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time.